after to Dr. and my friend and engineer, so one of the members for our group 7, our company name is Panasonic Hunting Berhad, and our type of industry is electrical and electronic. And the country we choose are Japan and Singapore. My group member has me, Ellen, Karen, Chong, and Emilia. So without further ado, let me start with introduction. Panasonic is a famous local company in Malaysia that retail electrical home applications. Panasonic founded in 1965 by Dr. Seri Chin Wen Kat. At the beginning of the business, kit ratio and electrical core is established in Palet Pulau, Penang. It is just a small literal camp workshop for the electrical home application. After the huge effect made by the founder, their business undergone rapid development for a small workshop become a new manufacturing hub and headquarters located in Bukit Minyak, Penang. Panasonic involved in the core business of manufacturing, importing, exporting, distributing, and marketing of electrical home applications for both domestic and international market. After the discussing, Japan and Singapore will be the target country to determine which country are most suitable for the Panasonic to develop the business. Next, I will continue the presentation about currency exchange rate between the Japan and Singapore. Exchange rate is the value of the home currency in relation to other currency. Japan is using floating exchange rate, implies that the Japanese yen exchange rate is decided by the demand and supply of the currency market. Bank of the Japan explained that Japan using floating exchange rate is because controlling the money supply was difficult for the Bank of the Japan to accommodate all equally about exchange foreign currency when under the free exchange rate regime. However, the floating exchange rate of the Japanese yen break a lot of the currency exchange rates. First, price risk. According to the Bank of the Japan, there has a strong correlation between the trade turn and Japanese yen value. In general, a rising in turn of the trade related to gain in the Japanese yen, while a decrease in the turn of the trade is related with a depreciation of the Japanese yen. Electronic price has a significant impact on the trade agreement. This is because electronic constitute a significant portion of the Japanese export, and therefore change in the electronic price affect the export pricing. Second, transaction risk. Transaction risk occurs because before putting the company statement, any overseas income, expenses, and international tax paid must be transferred to the Japanese yen. Because free floating exchange rate inject a high degree of volatility, currency value fluctuates in the real time. Singapore is using managed floating exchange rate. One of the risk factors for the Singapore is sovereign risk. Sovereign risk is the risk that the government is unable to pay its debt and default of the payment. It has a direct influence on the country business when government decreases bankruptcy. Singapore is a free market economy, and economy is mainly driven by the export in electronic, manufacturing and machinery, financial space, tourists, and the world business cargo shipment. The sovereign risk may affect the worth of the currency investment contract of the Singapore being reduced. Besides that, economic risk also one of the factors that exist in the Singapore in 2020, which has pandemic of the COVID-19 outbreak. It was a difficult year for the Singapore economy because of the export of electronic was reduced. Containers in the Singapore are stacking out due to the movement control order to fight against the COVID-19 order, limit the transportation of non-essential goods. When compared with the Japan, the electronic business do not reject any special treatment in terms of the extent of the foreign currency profit or loss because of the balancing in exchange rate and the value of the yen has affected the Japanese economy. While for the Singaporean, no matter the demography, economic or political circumstances, Panasonic has more chance to expand their business in the Singapore since electronic are an economic source of the Singapore, and starting for the 2022, Singapore electronic export continue to show a strong growth are expected to allow the Panasonic to develop again. So that's it for my part. Now I will pass to next presenter.
Thank you, Jenny. Now I will present about currency control. A strategy to manage the money supplies and a complex microeconomy objective is Japan currency control. The two main objectives of Japan currency control are stable price and maintaining a positive balance of payments. Japan has adoptable tool for carrying out currency control. The first category is loan. The second is the statutory interest rate as one of the most important instruments. When the central bank changes the statutory reserve ratio, the two categories most impacted are total social credit and financial institutions. As the statutory reserve ratio demanded by the central bank increased and the quantity of money available for lending declines, logic said the commercial bank should turn over more default reserve. Panasonic Holding Berhad will be able to borrow much money from the National Bank of Japan as a result, which should receive it from growing its company. But the central bank's statutory reserve ratio should be as low as possible, while still allowing commercial banks to use as much money as they can. Panasonic Holding Berhad can borrow a lot of money to expand. Monetary Authority, often known as currency control in Singapore, refer to the regulation and action implemented by the National Monetary Authority to manage and regulate the national money supplies and achieve microeconomic goal. The monetary authority was forced to tighten monetary policy in response to the recent spike in price brought on by COVID-19 and the Russia-Ukraine war. This strengthens the Singapore dollar, which helped to lower living expenses and somewhat offsets the inflation pressure. Currency appreciation has two drawbacks. Export expenses will be greater while import costs are lower. Export will be severely hampered by a strong currency, so Panasonic Holding Berhad can develop the market in Singapore because the strong Singapore dollar currency leads to low import costs. As a result, Panasonic Holding Berhad can lower price. The currency control in Japan and Singapore has greater potential for developing Panasonic Holding Berhad. The economy is gradually getting better as a result of the pandemic recovery and the conclusion of the Russia-Ukraine war. However, Japan has flexible options for implementing monetary policy to support the yen and lead Panasonic Holding Berhad development in Japan. The Singapore dollar risk has made export more expensive, which will undoubtedly affect them. But Panasonic Holding Berhad is not focused on exporting because it can import raw material from other countries at a cheaper cost and with a higher profit margin. Panasonic Holding Berhad can focus on import costs. Next is skill labor. In order to develop skill of the nation, several education and vocational institutions have been built. Once that individual reach working age, they may then join society and contribute to it. The scarcity of skilled labor personnel in Japan is because as the population ages, as increasing number of older people have returned to serve society, so that it has been difficult for the number of young people in Japan to quickly surpass that for the elderly. Japan learns how to deal with this issue from American country by lowering immigration standard, allowing more people who want to move to Japan to become skilled labor, but this does not address Japan's need for skilled labor. This is because the xenophobic thinking of the Japanese make the treatment of many foreign labor who come to work far worse than that of the Japanese. Because of all this, it will be challenging for Panasonic Holding Berhad to manage excellent skilled labor. Singapore National Core Development Plan, creating a country with tailor, developing a country with tailor, and its accomplishments are closely tied. Singapore education system use English as the teaching language, and Singapore also use English advantage to attract skilled labor from Malaysia, China, and other countries. Through the outbreak of the COVID-19 led to shortage of skilled labor, the Singapore government launched a new type of visa called Teach Pass in January 2021. Because Singapore know how to return excellent skilled labor, this can make it easily for Panasonic Holding Berhad to hire skilled labor and expand its business in all areas. Panasonic Holding Berhad should choose to develop its business in Singapore instead of Japan. Japan's severe population as and lack of skilled labor will lead to a delay in Panasonic Holding Berhad production efficiency. While Singapore is one of the countries with the largest concentration for skilled labor, there is also the treatment given to skilled labor by the Singapore government, so that Panasonic Holding Berhad can quickly find skilled labor suitable for the positions and develop.
Next is facilities. Facilities refer to buildings, equipment, and services provided for a specific purpose. Business facilities are land-owned, operated, used, controlled, or leased by the company. Japan has benefits in strategic location because Japan is located in the north of the Pacific, surrounded by Taiwan in the southeast, the East China Sea, and the Philippine Sea, allow companies to reach the largest portion of the Asian market. The government developed the Invest in Japan Business Support Center as a support service and resource for investing to provide information on investment regulations. The challenges to expand business in Japan are the initial cost estimate $120,000 to $130,000 for subsidiary company and $77,000 to $87,000 for branch. Next, Japan within the ring of fire exposed it to natural disasters such as earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions, and the cost of damaged facilities caused by natural disasters in Japan is higher. Next is Singapore. Singapore has a business-friendly tax structure in taxes earned income. Singapore allows foreign ownership of 100% of registered companies. Strategic location in Southeast Asia, easy to access raw materials through shipping and transport. And one of the busiest ports is the Port of Singapore, about 36 million containers annually. The challenges of business to expand in Singapore are need to maintain registration with ACRA, have at least one local director conduct the AGM for the business, and comply with the common reporting standards. The company need to keep up with the competition because the company will competing with all the other foreign companies and thriving local business. As a result, Panasonic Holdings Malaysia Berhad should decided to expand its business in Singapore because its tax structure is business friendly, especially for tax earned income. It meets the challenges of a startup business and competes with relatively major companies, which can solve and improve competitiveness in the future. If the company expands its business in Japan, may face natural disasters, which can lead to financial loss and the initial startup business business estimated cost is higher. Next is infrastructure. An institution, region, or nation's basic physical framework is referred to as the infrastructure. It frequently has to do with industrial activity or the production of public goods. Japan offers cutting-edge technology and competence in achieving on-time delivery, high operation rates, and high expensibility to minimize maintenance costs. Japan also increased traffic and transportation infrastructure, include high-speed railways, urban transports, and port operations. Japan has a holistic capacity for information and communication technology (ICT) development. Japan provides effective, dependable energy infrastructure services and better living conditions. For Singapore, Singapore has a strong ecosystem of banks, insurance providers, and legal firms prepared to meet the needs of foreign investors. The government issued new bonds worth up to $68 billion to finance large infrastructure investments. To fund the development of an integrative waste and water rehab center, the government issued green bonds worth Singapore $19 billion. Sustainable technology assets in the new Tuas port will have unique capabilities for loading and unloading containers. The world's fastest growing technology, green hydrogen, offers optimism for Singapore's sustainable development objectives. As a result, Panasonic Holding Malaysia Berhad should decide to expand business in Singapore because Singapore provides strong ecosystem of banks, insurance providers, and legal firms prepared to meet the needs of foreign investors. Singaporean government finance infrastructure investments and create a green and sustainable financial center. Singapore also have sustainable technology in Tuas Port. And the last, green hydrogen offers optimism for Singapore's sustainable development objectives.
As the figures show, during the 5 years period, 2016 until 2020, Japan FDI inflow decreased 54.09% from $40.95 billion in 2016 to $18.80 billion in 2017. However, the FDI inflow started to show an increment, which is increased 227.18% from $18.80 billion in 2016 to $61.51 billion in 2020. As a result, the increment of the FDI into Japan provide more competitive advantage to their economy that lead more efficiency and higher productivity. Plus, the Singapore FDI inflow inconstant. Singapore FDI inflow increased 14.37% from $65.36 billion in 2016 to $74.75 billion in 2020. But there was a decrease for FDI inflow, which was $99.21 billion in 2017 to $81.18 billion in 2018. Moreover, the FDI inflow also declined from $111.48 billion in 2019 to $74.75 billion in 2020. This is due to the pandemic of COVID-19, since Singapore have been strengthened their public health to limit the spread of COVID-19 pandemic. Thus, the comparisons of the FDI inflow between the Japan and Singapore must be competitive. But the Singapore was in the rank of 5 as compared to Japan in the rank of 7. As evidence, the latest FDI inflow for Singapore higher $74.75 billion than Japan $61.51 billion in 2020. This is lead to the Panasonic Holding Berhad Malaysia can take the perfect opportunity to expand more subsidiaries in Singapore to maximize the shareholder wealth. Next, Panasonic Holding Berhad also need to consider both countries' political risk and market imperfection before run businesses in Japan and Singapore. The political risk happens from the unexpected changes, the tax rule from the government to outright the expropriation of the asset held by the foreigners. Japan is a constitutional monarchy that limited to criminal duties, even though a prime minister acts as a head of state in diplomatic occasions. According to Sekiguchi and NZTR, the leader Shinzo Abe was replaced as a prime minister by Yoshihide Suga following Abe's resignation and a party internal election in September 2020. But Japan remains a coalition government of the Liberal Democratic Party (LDP) and the centrist Komeito Party, whereas the LDP secured a sole majority in the lower house. However, it will be significantly changes to the political climate soon if there are unexpected events. Political risk in Singapore as well are quite low. According to the Political and Economic Risk Consultancy, Singapore was at the lowest political risk in Asia. In fact, Singapore is a sovereign nation that free of risk and now stable in the internal security department. where the ISD mission is to make sure the Singapore is safe. Hence, the Singapore have better business opportunity for the nations. As a result, Singapore more worth to invest business in as compared to Japan due to the low political risk. The reason can cause a Panasonic holding berhad to put trust on foreign country to run their multinational business. This can strengthen their profit continuously in the foreign country, regardless taking much risk. Furthermore, market imperfections refer to a various type of fiction and impredicament prevent market from functioning perfectly, but it is also play a key role in motivating a multinational corporation to locate the production overseas. Japan is the third largest market, competitor and the partner with the 125 million people. Recently, the policy of the little foreign investment have changed and it is increasing rapidly. Japan was amended the financial instrument and the Exchange Act in May 2021, indirectly introduced the new exemptions from the registration obligation available for the foreign asset manager to encourage the foreign investor to move their businesses in Japan. In addition, Panasonic Holding Berhad, a multinational corporation, also must concerns about the legal system of the Singapore before running their businesses in Singapore. The legal system in Singapore follows the English Common Law. Based on the Singapore law, all Singaporeans are equal regardless of race, religions, and creeds. However, the other multinational corporation must alert to both civil and criminal laws before expanding their subsidiaries in Singapore. To summarize, Singapore and Japan for market imperfection quite competitive. This is because Japan is the third largest market, higher investment rather than USA and UK, and amend the rule to encourage more foreign investors to invest businesses in their country. Likewise, for Singapore also open investment to foreign investor to run business in their country. But there are some laws that the foreign investor must alert, which are criminal and serious law before running businesses in Singapore. The reasons only for Singaporeans safely. Thank you.
Thanks, Amelia. Now we're looking into the expected GDP growth of Japan and Singapore. For Japan, we observe that GDP growth is falling into a downtrend. After a recovery from 2015, we can see that Japan faced a decrement due to COVID-19 pandemic. Japan's government action is more prioritized on how to rebuild and enhance their country's health system. This will be a limitations for their economics to recovery. And because their decisions is tend to recover their domestic growth of consumption and productions, and they at the same time they want to control the pandemic, this will cause their economic recovery become slow. Hence, we forecast that Japan will continue its downtrend of GDP growth. In terms of Singapore, it showed a strong uptrend after recovery from COVID-19 pandemic. This is due to the strong economic fundamentals, a less degree of corruption, and the effective monetary system and legal system implemented by Singapore. For example, Singapore are one of the best business-friendly country of the world, which provide many advantages for local and foreign investors. Hence, Singapore remain ranked as one of the top positions as a low-risk country to invest. More investors start up their business in Singapore, and Singapore remain high GDP along the decade. We predict that Singapore GDP growth will continue to be increased. Next, we forecast the exchange rate of Japan to Malaysia ringgit. To forecast the exchange rate, we refer to three elements. First is the exchange rate trend itself. Second is throughout the purchasing power parity of the country. Third is through the GDP growth of the country. So for Japan, the exchange rate trend show a significant downtrend after COVID-19 pandemic. The purchasing power parity of Japan also declined and show a downtrend, which reduced from 144 LCU to 100 LCU per USD. As mentioned just now, Japan's GDP growth also in a downtrend. Hence, we assume that the demand for Japan's currency are not strong, which will cause the exchange rate of Japan to be depreciated. For Singapore, we can see a correction of the market, but it's near to support line, which means Singapore to Malaysia ringgit is still remain uptrend at this moment. In terms of purchasing power parity, Singapore also record an uptrend even though US is keep raising their interest rate. The demand of Singapore dollar expected to continue increase due to a low tax rate and high interest rate, which will attract the investor to invest. Hence, we predict that exchange rate Singapore to Malaysia ringgit will be appreciated. As for our recommendations, we recommend Singapore as the country to invest for Panasonic. In generally, Singapore have less risks. The current risks that Singapore facing will be able to overcome and recover once the pandemic is under control. Singapore also have a better currency control, which gives investors a better opportunity to earn more. Last, Singapore also have strong GDP growth and exchange rate, which will generate better income for Panasonic. This is due to Singapore have a stable demand of the domestic and international market, and the higher exchange rate helps Panasonic in terms of lower cost of material. Most of the material are imported from Malaysia and other countries, which means the cost of material will be cheaper. That's all from us. Thanks for listening.